your podcast app. You'll see there's a discourse happening. Is this book a masterpiece or problematic? One's a lifelong diehard fan, the other's a first-time reader. Both are really smart and funny and attractive. Sweet Valley, Sweet Valley, talking twins and hierarchy. Sweet Valley, Sweet Valley, relentless focus on their bodies. Sweet Valley, Sweet Valley, what do they mean by all American? Sweet Valley, Sweet Valley, no sex, just titillation.
Hello.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Hi there. Can you hear me? Bonjour. Je m'appelle Robert. Yes, that's French those young girls are speaking. But no, they're not French. Je suis la jeune fille.
Le chic, c'est la vie. C'est bon, c'est bon.
Oh, c'est bon. C'est bon. This book, do you want to just 6-word it?
By the way, guys, it's super edition number 3 now, right?
Yeah.
And it's called Spring Break.
I don't have 6 words ready. I just I'm like so filled with exuberance and childlike glee from this book that I literally cannot contain myself.
Okay, I have a 9-word.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for here. Yeah, because what is the difference between 6 and 9 after all?
But one of the words I absolutely do not know how to pronounce.
Ooh,
A taste of bouillabaisse and xenophobia on the Riviera.
I love. Oh, j'adore. Also, was Riviera the word you didn't know? You did perfectly.
Bouillabaisse.
I was kidding, but I feel like you crushed
Oh.
bouillabaisse as well.
Thanks.
Danger, intrigue, romance, mistaken identities. J'adore. This book bangs. And then when you think it can't bang more, it's like, oh no, you think you're at chapter 13 and you're done? No, sweetheart, we've got banging left to do. So get ready, because we got to bang. This book bangs.
Go off. Just tell me about this book. Tell me how you feel about it. Just go. Talk.
I mean, so I love this book. I enter this book in a number of different ways. I enter this book as an adult who was the chaperone on a spring break trip to a foreign country where the kids were placed with host families and did not speak so much of the language. So
Wow.
I've taken kids, high school kids around Jessica's age and Elizabeth's age to England where they did speak the language, to Spain where they certainly did not speak the language. So I entered it in that way. I also entered it as someone who loves the classic text, A Tale of Two Cities. Famously, it's the reason why I became a high school English teacher. And A Tale of Two Cities, like the two cities, London and Paris. Here we've got two cities, and Sweet Valley, but it works so well.
Oh no.
It's
that
just
was
so
uncomfortable.
brilliant and so beautiful. It was so uncomfortable.
How you said it.
Sweet Valley? So I love that, but I love that all of the notes in this book are so predictable and like, everything is telegraphed to you 20 or 30 or 40 pages before it happens, and you see it happening, or I saw it happening, and I loved it. There's a moment where it's like very obvious that a twin switch is coming, and I wrote in the margins, twin switch is coming, and then a twin switch came. There's a moment where it's very obvious that there's going to be like a shipwrecky kind of stormy sea situation, and then a stormy sea. I mean, it's so good. And one of the things that I love is the way that they are able to hold a mirror up and show us like what's happening in Sweet Valley, what's happening in Comp, like the kind of the overlap. And listeners, just so you know, I am saying Cannes, a place I don't really know how to say. And so I'm just kind of overpronouncing it.
Instead of using comedy as a defense mechanism, let us be vulnerable. And how do you think you should say it?
I think it's probably just can.
And that's right.
But
That's
it doesn't feel right. Feels right, you know? I love this book. I live for this book. I also love that this book doesn't really have an ending. it just stops. Like one would expect it's spring break. You would expect that it starts with them leaving from Sweet Valley to Cannes and coming back, and it ends with them coming back to Sweet Valley. It doesn't. It ends with them being like, we still have a couple of days in France. Who knows what's going to happen? I loved it. I lived, I laughed, I loved. I just like j'adore. Could I get a little bit of like some Pardo salt on this delicious bouillabaisse that I've brought to you? Sprinkle something on me.
I don't know. I'm weirdly not having feelings on this one. It's like, there's some stuff I liked and there's some stuff I hated and there's some stuff that was really, really fun, but I'm not like having any which way or a thing I have to rant about. I mean, Stephen must die. I'll just say that.
Oh,
Stephen,
yeah.
he must, and I think I've said the words, this is the nail in the coffin about Stephen for the past probably 4 or 5 episodes or 4 or 5 books, and by the way, it's not the last.
Yeah.
And something that's been haunting me. So we've just done this for the 80th time with him. When I tell you there's a book, I don't know how many books later, you know what the title of it is?
Memories of Trisha?
Exactly. It's called The Ghost of Trisha Martin.
Oh, fuck that noise.
We might just have to skip it. We honestly, there's a couple we might just have to skip. Anyhow. All right.
I'd love to get a little bit more about your, like, so you don't have a
about
lot of
this
feelings.
book.
Do you remember it? Was it one that you owned? Was it one that you came back to time and again?
I vaguely remember it. I don't strongly remember it. Like, I think of these, like, I didn't strongly remember Perfect Summer either. I think Malibu Summer is the one I really remember. And then I think the Honky Tonk one I remember. This one only very vaguely. So I don't have any sort of emotional attachment to it. I mean, listen, I loved seeing them on a plane. I loved the duty-free shenanigans. And, seeing them experience jet lag, what to do when they wake up in the morning, how do you get to know a place? A lot of it was so true to life in that way. The Stephen plot, it just, again, it's medical at this point because it's my blood pressure at this point, and it's the misogyny. It was so next level. How we had to upgrade Ned from demon to Lucifer? We got to do something. We have to sort of perform some sort of ritual. Something must be done. And just how do we address? Because otherwise it's like, I feel that I'm going crazy.
I almost feel like we need to do some kind of like, I bind you, Stephen. I bind you from doing harm against yourself and doing harm against others. Do you remember? Have you seen The Craft?
I have seen The Craft, but I didn't get the reference.
So one of the witches turns evil, Nancy, and there's this whole scene where they do a binding ceremony where they bind Nancy. I bind you, Nancy. I bind you from doing harm against yourself and harm against others. I bind you, Nancy. And I feel like we need that for Stephen.
Yeah, so should we do it just on some sort of imaginary thing, or should we get an actual doll?
I'm happy to get a doll.
Or we could, you know what, this might not be nice. I think something slightly less. Let's take it down a notch. I'm not trying to put any bad energies in the world out there.
No, aren't we trying to bind the bad energy to contain it?
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know if I need to do actual sort of like witchcraft.
Okay.
Maybe it's like, can we designate him like a status or a name or something? Like maybe we don't say his name. Maybe we do something else instead of say his name, or maybe like just something to symbolically alienate him or designate him a different category. Is there another word for Lucifer? What's another word for like the devil?
Like Beelzebub? Do you want to call him Beelzebub? Is that what we're getting at?
Yes, wait, what even is that?
What's another name for the devil?
Beelzebub?
Yeah, it's Lord of the Flies.
Okay, I'm on Wikipedia for Beelzebub. Oh my god, I'm dying. The pronunciation, I can't. Wait, it's known as Lord of the Flies?
Yeah, have you read Lord of the Flies? I guess is that not a Canadian staple, Lord of the Flies?
I've not read it.
You're not missing much.
What happened? Kids, they end up on an island, get mad at each other?
You know it.
Yeah.
You've already read it.
So Beelzebub is Lord of the Flies means what? It's a demon?
Yeah, king of all evil.
We could also call Stephen Dybbuk.
I like Dybbuk a lot.
Okay, he's Dybbuk. Wait, do we need to explain to our listeners that Dybbuk is a demon? Dybbuk in Jewish folklore, a disembodied human spirit that because of former sins, yes, wanders restlessly good until it finds a haven in the body of a living person. Don't like that. I'm not trying to have that from Stephen. Believe in such. All right, can we adapt it? How about that?
I don't think we need to adapt it because I think that is what he's doing. He is this like evil spirit who is trying to harness women and kind of find his anchor point in these women.
So it's descriptive, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that he's then gonna be like successful to embody, like that we're gonna then become inhabited, but like it would not be us calling that onto ourselves, for example.
Oh, God forbid. I certainly hope I'm not going to get gimmicked by Stephen.
I read too many Goosebumps book as a kid, and one of them was called Be Careful What You Wish For. So I'm very, very careful. What am I wishing for?
That makes sense. Like so much of a monkey paw.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, a monkey. It's like a short story where you wish on a monkey paw and you get exactly what you wish for, but it's not what you want.
Oh, well, that's exactly what we're saying.
And they probably ripped off R.L. Stine. To the text.
Did you see the cover? Did you hide it? You saw it. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to lie to you. I didn't look at the cover carefully, but I did see that one of the taglines is like bonjour or something.
It's bon voyage, ... Really.
Oh, it was very close. So I cheated, but not very effectively. Bon voyage, ...
Let's go ahead and do it.
Oh my God, this cover is incroyable.
I love it so much.
We've got Liz, we've got Jess. Liz is wearing kind of like a sage-colored button-up blouse, lavalier very visible. Jess is wearing a more fashionable kind of pink button-down with a jacket over top of it, but she is like holding the jacket kind of open and thrusting her breasts at the sky.
She's holding her jacket open. I absolutely would not say she's thrusting her breasts. I think that's a little bit over-sexualizing this gesture. I think it's more of like it's almost like you want there to be a backpack. You feel like she should be holding onto backpack straps or something. It's like she's sort of like, it's like she's bracing herself for adventure, kind of. Like, here I go.
I can see that. All of her energy is up and out. She is like looking up. Her mouth is open. This looks like, it doesn't look like a drawing. It looks like a stock photo of two very bad actresses where they said like, one of you should be looking like you're excited about the future, and the other of you is going to look at an English language brochure about France, but I want you to look at it as if you're really surprised, and maybe you don't read the language. Maybe you don't read it all. Liz has this look of like confused excitement on her face. It's like, what are words?
I have some things to add.
Please.
First of all, I disagree that you said Jess's shirt is more fashionable. I just want to give my reading on Liz's outfit. Please. First of all, I think both of them look so gorgeous and amazing. It's elevated and it's more sophisticated and it's more European because they're wearing blouses. They're not wearing their usual more casual clothes. This is more European look. And specifically, the blouse that Elizabeth is wearing is so freaking spot on. Whoever designed this, like, I don't know if it was James Matthews or what, but they got this spot on, okay? And I can tell you, my great Tante Tell, who lives in Milan and is like so fashionable, and like this is how she's always dressed, and like this is what they wear. It's like a loose blouse, and you could tell it's like gorgeous fabric, like silk, and the collar is sort of like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like a longer.
Is it a Peter Pan collar? Is that what a Peter Pan collar is?
No, Peter Pan collar is like this. I don't know how to describe the color. We'll put it in the works cited or we'll figure it out, but it's a very fashionable look. Plus, we get a tiny sliver of what's going on at her waist. And I believe what's going on is it's either a one piece, which is insanely amazing, or it's a shirt tucked into a matching bottoms, which is also amazing. So it's a silk kind of set. So for me, this is gorgeous. This is the most amazing thing I've ever seen on her. And Jess, what I love about Jess's outfit, again, it's a button up. We don't often see this type of thing on Jess, but it looks like very kind of crisp cotton. It looks like very good and nice and elegant. And she's wearing on top of it some sort of either blazer or kind of raincoat, like trench type of vibes. But like the color combo is psychotically good. The shirt is sort of this palest baby pink. And then the jacket is almost like a very, very pale gray becoming lavender sort of. Like gray with a tinge of purpley kind of colors. So it's like so gorgeous. Like, I just think they both look incredible. I love it. It's elevated, it's sophisticated, it's chic, and it's simple. And this is how French women dress.
I love your analysis. I do have two things to add. One is they do not look 16 to me. They look much, much older than 16. The other thing is Do you know who Lucy Lawless is? TV Xena warrior princess?
Yeah.
Liz to me looks like Lucy Lawless with blonde hair.
Hmm.
They have very similar faces. Jess does not.
You know, you talked about how Jess's posture is very, and her gaze is very up and out.
Mhm.
Liz is very kind of excitedly or surprisedly looking in this pamphlet called France. And what I think this would convey, or would purport to convey, potentially according to some very, very simple-minded viewers, would be that, well, they're here in France and Liz is looking at her little map and going to do things by the book, and she's going to look at the things and do the sort of usual stuff that the pamphlet would tell you. But Jess doesn't have a pamphlet. She's not even looking at what is the street she's on. She's looking up at the sky and she's ready for adventure, and whatever happens to the breeze blows in. And the arms on the lapel, as you mentioned. And so this would, I think, set us up to believe that this is at least the approach that the girls are going to be taking to their trip to France. Is this actually the case? We may discuss.
I hope we do discuss.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Ugh,
Yeah.
I wish I could take my contacts out to see more detail, but I think for the first time, Jess has a manicure that looks like a sort of French or whitish pink manicure.
That does look. I'm gonna just take out
Like her
my
nails are
phone
long
and
and-
zoom in.
Yeah, I can't. Or I guess I could with my phone. Actually, let me do that. That's smart.
It does seem to be a French tip manicure.
Oh my God, that's huge, Robert.
And I would encourage
Oh
you to
my
look at
God.
Liz's index finger. I can't tell. I don't think it's a manicure, but it also could be. I feel like Jessica's definitely.
Wow. I'm gonna take a picture. Hold on.
Look at us being modern day sleuths using our magnifying glasses.
CSI over here.
And what's the
Okay.
crime? If it's a crime to love these books, lock me up and throw away the key. You know
I
what
don't
mean?
think Liz has a manicure.
Well, why don't we
Okay,
just
you start.
Okay. Bon voyage, and join us as Miss Dalton's French Club has organized a little home exchange for the children of Sweet Valley. Elizabeth and Jessica have wrangled to be placed in the home of a single mother, Avery G, we'll call her. Very hard to say her last name. And they're both going to be placed in the same home. And Avery's daughter, Fernie, Ferney, a name I am not familiar with, is going to Sweet Valley to stay with the Wakefields. We're in the French Riviera, and we're loving it.
Though on the plane, Liz had been really getting her peepers on the photo of the Glees family, and her eyes were particularly drawn to Renee, the handsome son, and she pointed that out to Jessica. When they meet Madame Glees, Avery, and Renee, who picked them up at the airport, he has actually quite a frosty demeanor and doesn't seem too interested in warming up to the girls.
He's a huge dick.
Yeah.
Avery is truly, truly lovely. Renee speaks absolutely perfect English. And Avery is like, oh, will you show the girls around? He doesn't want to. He hates spending time with them. He, in the car, is like really, really rude. And he's rude both specifically to our sweet loves, Jess and Liz, but he's also kind of like generally just xenophobic and anti-American and says lots of stuff like, why would I expect them to behave any differently? They're American. Like, Americans are all selfish. Americans are all cruel. Americans are all evil.
Yeah, it becomes pretty clear that he has a thing against Americans, and Liz gets her eavesdropping ears out and overhears a conversation where him and Avery are fighting. He's like, but mon père, and she knows that means father, and no one knows where Monsieur Glees is, so he must be out of the picture. And she puts two and two together, figures out that he's American, and that's why he doesn't like Americans. Well, Liz decides to make it her personal journey to get involved in the most intimate and personal problems of a complete stranger once again, and take it upon herself to quote unquote prove him wrong, that Americans are actually nice and good.
the way that they play with language in the text is really interesting because they actually try to be honest about like when people would speak French and when people would speak English. The only difficulty is they simultaneously play up the fact that Liz's French is okay but not great and Jess's French is pretty bad. And yet Liz is able to eavesdrop in French and understand like all the problems with the father. At one point, Mademoiselle Glisset said, or Madame Glisset says, you know, Renee speaks such good English, it's a gift from his father, which also gets us thinking about kind of the Pascal's gun that's going to go off in 40-ish pages. So there's a kind of an interplay between what is understood and what is kind of what are gaps in meaning.
Yeah, although overall I think I felt it was pretty like made sense, I guess. I thought it was done, it felt real to me. Like, yeah, I don't know.
There were a couple of places where like they say, you know, so and so and so and so are speaking in rapid French because they're upset. And all Elizabeth could glean was, and then she could actually still figure out most of it. And I was like, I don't know if I totally believe
No, but that was like the mop hair thing.
Well, no, it happens later as well.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, we can go, that could be an interesting thing to look at in the text.
Potentially. So Jess actually makes friends with the local boy, Mark. I actually don't, how does she make friends with him?
Okay, what happens is it turns out that Avery Glees, who, although she's lovely, kind of has to like always be at work. So she can't really show them around. She's an emergency nurse or something. I don't know. So she's always at the hospital, which is very admirable. And we, of course, thank her for her service. That being said, it kind of leaves the girls a little bit like twiddling their thumbs at home because Renee is not exactly hanging out to be their tour guide. He's kind of off on his scooter doing whatever, hanging out with Edward or whoever his friends are. So Jess and Liz are kind of figuring out, okay, well, do we go exploring? And they have some different approaches to this. And one time they go for a jog and Liz is so annoying about it and keeps telling Jess she needs to jog more and she's too lazy. And Jess is like, you're being annoying. I'm going to go my own route and like walk around or something. So they split up and Jess is looking at all these beautiful rich houses along the Mediterranean. And there's a rich house and a Rolls Royce or some fancy car. We could look at what it is. And the guy who comes out of it, unfortunately, his hair's frizzy and he has potentially Jewish nose, and we will go to the text. But he is nice to Jessica and seems rich and tells her he's going to take her to his parents' private beach club. And she's like, great, because what she's been basically fantasizing about is wearing her gold lame bikini on a yacht and sipping I don't know what. So this is going to be her perfect fantasy. And let me tell you, this was one where I wouldn't predict where it was going to go because I think it's going to go the other place. Like when I read this, not remembering, I'm like, this is a Jack situation. The fact that she meets him outside the house to me is a dead sign of like either this isn't his house, right? Or he works for them or something. That isn't what happened. Like that is, he's not a liar about being rich or that being his house. But what I thought was actually so funny was what the actual twist ends up being is that he does get her access to this fancy private club, which was exactly what she thought she wanted. But it turns out all the people there are old people that are boring. And later she ends up realizing the cool place to go is the public beach, which is where all the cool teenagers hang out. So she learned a little lesson about what's cool. What's cool isn't always what's rich.
Exactly.
And that's a very important moral.
I don't know if I buy it, but okay. I'll take it under advisement.
But it's never cool to be ugly.
Oh my God, could you imagine?
Meanwhile, Liz is feeling sad because her crush on Renee is sort of keeps being rude to her. So she goes to write in an olive orchard and she loves to write her feelings. And then on her way from the olive orchard, she is bumped into by the absolute cutest German Shepherd puppy called Nikki, who
First name dog in the text, I think, right?
Wow.
Give it up for Nikki. And sorry, listeners, this will be important to you. It is Nykki.
And she figures out, where the dog's home is and goes to return the dog to the owner. And guess what?
What?
And of course, Liz would never care about such a thing or be interested or excited by such things. She doesn't care about such things. But it turns out that the dog lives in a big mansion. Wait, are you giving the finger to me or Liz?
To Liz. I would never give you the finger.
I thought you were giving me, but like I thought you might be giving to Liz, but then I thought, oh, maybe you're giving me the finger of like, oh, you have to be rude to Liz. Okay.
No. So, Liz goes on and on about like, I don't care about the fact that these people are rich. Jessica would, but I don't even notice. I don't notice how grand this home is. I don't even notice.
I can't with her. Anyway.
Nor should you have to.
So it turns out the German Shepherd lives at, it's a countess. It's a countess who lives there, and the countess takes an interest in Liz. And Liz is only interested in her because she's an old lady. But guess what? Turns out she has a hot grandson, Jean-Claude, who is very charming, and ends up hanging out with Liz and taking her to the cool, fun places. And they end up doing the fun stuff. And, Jess kind of feels like she has to sort of make good on this sort of pretending like she's having fun with Mark. So she keeps hanging out with him. But interestingly, and I think we must ask why, Liz has encountered two men. The first is Renee. Renee has been hostile, has been rude, has refused to speak to her in English, has insulted her at every turn, has been, actively hostile. The other guy she meets is Jean-Claude, who, yes, he's fabulously wealthy and he's also fabulously handsome, but while he's a little, for Liz, she says he's a little, quote unquote, sort of too charming. I find him to be basically unassailable in terms of he has been friendly, warm. He also spoke to her in English, tried to make her comfortable. He's offered to take her all around and has taken her all over town, and not in any creepy, I haven't found him to be creepy or anything like this. Like, he's a perfectly nice guy. And we might ask ourselves, Liz in this position was not interested in Jean-Claude and went after instead and became increasingly pursuant of Renee. And we might ask why.
And I want to just, for our listeners who aren't reading along, I do want to couch kind of the pursuant that Pardo uses is not necessarily romantically pursuant. She does feel like a spark of electricity when they accidentally touch. But it seems that her pursuing is more in like a fix the problem way and less in a bang it out way.
I don't think so. It's both. I think it's totally both. Like, I really think they make a point of telling us that she is sexually attracted to him. Like, she talks about his appearance even from the photo in a way she's not done with other guys. The fact of her saying she felt an electric tingle when their hands touched.
It's like kissing God.
I think there's signs that there is a physical, or there's a sexual attraction here that is at the same time with the savior thing. But I think it's interesting because we haven't seen that dynamic, I think, from Liz before in a romantic way. Like, we've seen her savior to people in a friend way or a family way, but she's always been with Todd, who has been this pretty stable,
homosexual,
functional in most ways relationship. What's going on, I think, with her and Renee is quite dysfunctional. And it's her continued attraction to him with his behavior to her it's concerning, I think. So it's interesting.
I think, though, it does feel, although there is an undercurrent of sexuality and energy there that I would be remiss if I denied, I think for Liz, she is mostly seeing it as, this is a problem I can solve. I can intervene and fix this guy's life. I think they're both going on. I guess what I'm trying to say is, for Liz, the way that Liz talks and thinks through it, she has kind of potentially sublimated her sexual desires into this desire to fix and save him.
You're saying it's more conscious versus subconscious?
That is what I'm trying to say.
In some ways, it's a familiar pattern of her being a savior. But in other ways, if we think of it as she has two possible romantic contenders here, right? Which is also what's going on. It is against her typical grain to go for the Renee when she supposedly is used to stability, you know what I'm saying? Or attracted to stability. It's like, we've seen Jessica go after guys that mistreat her. We haven't seen that from Liz. So it's like, yeah, I know it wasn't so much, they weren't like making out and whatever the whole time, but like,
at all.
I do think it was very much like a sexual physical attraction.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't see her as going after him in a romantic way.
This may be semantic. Yeah, I'm not saying she explicitly pursued him romantically, but I think that like part of what was motivating her wanting to get him to like her was a romantic desire for him. I think we're a little bit in circles.
Sure.
I think it's maybe you are wanting to fight.
I do want to fight. I guess I didn't read it as her going for him. That's maybe we are in circles, but I don't think she sees him as I think she thought he was hot on the plane. She meets him and is like, this guy's a dick. Maybe I can help him unlock his father wound and kind of help him through that. And then once she has done that, she's like, oh, maybe I can bang him too. But I feel like it was kind of bookended with the middle being an unacknowledged desire to bang.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like she wasn't explicitly acknowledging that. But I guess it just seemed pretty clear to me that there was a connection between them that like seemed pretty, if not acknowledged, all these moments of like, and he looked at her and his gaze was so strong for a second and it seemed like he was gonna, and he suddenly seemed like this vulnerable person. Maybe he was gonna, but then he looked away and he was cold. Like it reminded me of like Collins and Dalton of like, I'm nothing but trouble. Like
I
it
can
felt
see
like
that.
they were both feeling that or something, you know? But anyway, it may be an interesting thing to look in the text or maybe not. I mean, we
Um,
did just talk about it for an hour.
an hour, and we haven't even gotten to the fun part, which is so Liz spends a day with Jean-Claude, and he's like, okay, tomorrow at 12:30, I'll pick you up and we can go to the beach because you haven't gone to the beach yet. That'll be so fun. And Liz is like, that sounds great. And then the next morning, Jess goes out with Mark for another boring beach day. So Liz is the only one at the house. Madame Gillet calls the house trying to reach Renee because she needs. What's so funny? Part of us lost it. What is it?
My dog Chalet, yours could change her name every time you say
What is it?
Glees.
Oh, Glee.
Well, I say Glees, you say Glise. I did not see an accent aigu on there, but
Listeners, I guess this is the moment I have
boo
to.
boo.
Yeah, this is the moment I have to come clean. I actually don't speak French. It turns out. I know you were
Only-
listening, thinking, "Oh, they speak perfect French." I don't.
Okay,
So,
so
Madame
Avery.
Avery, let's do Avery. Let's call her. Everybody does. Call me Avery. Avery calls the house looking for Renee because she is tending to a woman and she needs medication stat, but she can't leave the woman alone. So she needs Renee to go to the pharmacist, pick up the medication, take it to Avery and the woman, and then come home. Renee could be anywhere. We don't know where he is. And so Liz is like, I guess I'll do it. And so Liz goes on this absolutely cross-can adventure. She's taking
Delightful.
multiple buses.
Delightful.
Amazing. She gets to the pharmacy. She's got all this time. She's like, oh, will I make it back before Jean-Claude? And so before she leaves a note on the door that says, hey, Jean-Claude, I'll be back by 12:30. Please wait for me. When she leaves that note, I write in the margin, twin switch. You know it. So Liz gets held up at the pharmacist. Then she's coming back on her second bus and they sit in traffic. Long story short, she doesn't get back until well after 1. Jess is at this beach party and is like, this sucks. I'm going to pretend to have a headache. Pretends to have a headache, gets home, sees the note on the door, removes the note and says, I'll just wait around for Jean-Claude and say hi to him. Jean-Claude shows up, thinks Jessica's Elizabeth, and Jessica just doesn't have the time to clarify, so she just has to go out with him as if she's Elizabeth. What is she supposed to do? So what is she supposed to do? She just spends the whole day having the time of her life with Jean-Claude. Meanwhile, Jean-Claude does say some kind of, not totally nasty, but he's like, your French is way worse today. Because it is.
Well, it's funny, but then also Jean-Claude is like, it's funny, I like you even more today than yesterday. And like, there's a lot that, oh no, I liked this. I'm not laughing at it. I'm saying like, there was a lot that happened to try to signify to us that like, yes, he thinks it's Elizabeth and he fell for the switch or whatever, but he is sensing something with Jessica and it's reminiscent of Jessica and Bill on the beach and her being, well, then you do love me because that's who I am, or whatever. I actually thought it was cute that he was like, yeah, there's, you know, it's like, I don't know, your energy, I like you even more today. And I thought it was really sweet. But what I also thought was very funny is that he could be forgiven for not considering the possibility of the twin, because we are told that Elizabeth had told him he was there with her sister, but she couldn't remember the word for twin, which we're told is Junelle or something like this by Jessica. So that was a little convenient thing there.
Yeah, I mean, that was what, for us to suspend disbelief that Elizabeth doesn't remember the word for twin.
A joke.
But so you had a very generous reading of the Jean-Claude of it all. I was like, oh, is he responding to the fact that she can't communicate as well and is more sexually available and he likes that?
What? No, he just legit likes Jess. Like I thought they were legit cute together. And I also felt that at the end that was really acknowledged by Elizabeth of like at the end, like after the storm drama, like it's something like she saw a look in Jessica that she had never seen before, and Jessica really was in love with him. It's like I think we're supposed to understand that there's a real strong, unprecedented, even connection, dare I say, between Jessica and Jean-Claude. I felt it was sincere.
I thought it was
I loved
palpable
that.
and exciting.
Yeah.
I did have a little bit of the whole time I was like, wait, is Jean-Claude gonna be the one who's too good to be true? But no.
Right. Well, we're being set up. I mean, if there's two rich guys, one has to be fake, right? I don't know, but none of them was.
Okay. So they're having a lovely time. Meanwhile, Jean-Claude never calls Elizabeth to be like, where were you or what happened? Elizabeth calls to be like, where were you? But he isn't there. But then we kind of realize, oh, of course, Jean-Claude's not going to follow up with Elizabeth because Jean-Claude thinks he is with Elizabeth when he's with Jessica. So they keep spending time together, having a good time. Meanwhile, Elizabeth is like on her own and has several very lovely days. She like writes in the festival cafe. She goes for some lovely walks. She really likes spending, that kind of time exploring the countryside. She's doing great all by herself.
Mm-hmm.
She runs into Mark. Mark is like, hey, Jessica? And she's like, no, I'm Elizabeth. And she's like, oh yeah, she said you had a twin. She said she had a twin. Is Jessica okay? She had a really bad headache a couple of days ago. I wanted to see if she was okay. And Liz is like, yeah, she's fine. I don't know what you're talking about. And then he's like, oh, I'm going to an art opening later. I was going to take Jessica. Do you want to go? She does want to go. She goes and has a fabulous time.
Mm-hmm.
She has a very brief interaction with Renee where Renee thinks that she is trying to steal Jessica's boyfriend. And it's just like, oh, you Americans are so disloyal. You're so terrible.
He's so annoying.
It's truly unbearable.
So then they're leaving I think the art gallery, and it's like, looks like a storm's coming type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then Jessica and Jean-Claude simultaneously are having a romantic date on the boat, and this was the sort of Pascal's raindrops, I think, to which you alluded, that told us a storm was brewing, and they're like, well, we better get back. And she's like, but let's have one more kiss. And then it's like there's a big storm, and Liz is like, and it's like Jessica's not home yet, and where's Jessica? And Jessica's late, and should I be worried? And then she's like, oh no, it's like being a bad storm. And she like calls the Countess, figures out that Jessica's with Jean-Claude and that they're probably on his boat, and she figures out like where it docks from or something, and she figures out what beach to go to or something, and she tells Renee, like, you must take me to the beach, like, we must save them. And he's like, I can't do that. Like, I'm Renee and I hate the beach, because this whole time, I think we didn't say this, but basically one of his like little weird things has been that he actually hates the beach, and he actually hates the water. And Elizabeth is like, but why? Like, I think the beach is the nicest place ever, and I love to go for a swim. Isn't it the nicest thing? And he's like, has a cloud over his face, and he's like, back in the day, I used to love a swim until ... And he looks at a faraway way, and we learned that something very nasty has happened in the water. And then she's gossiping with all his friends, and they tell her that what happened is really quite a tragic story, which was he is really, really sad. He was swimming with a friend and didn't realize the friend had, I don't know, gotten caught in a current or had a cramp, and he was underwater, didn't hear the guy calling for help. Anyhow, by the time he realized it was too late, and he was diving under multiple times to try to find him and save him, and he lost him, and he ended up seeing them even recover the body, and it was a very, very traumatic experience, and he's been living with all this guilt. So, we see that Renee is quite troubled, in addition to, of course, he has all this resentment for his father, who is American and left him, blah, blah, blah. Anyhow, so now the storm's coming, and Liz is like, Renee, like, I know you hate the water, but please, like, you know how bad the storms can be, and if your friend should die, doesn't mean my twin sister should also have the same fate. Please, Renee, take me to the beach. And he's like, okay, but we must go on my moped or my Vespa or whatever it is. And she's like, but I have a fear of motorbikes. So they decide to go ahead and absolutely face their fears together. She gets on that bike, they go to the beach. It is a bad, bad storm wind. They see the boat, and the boat is kind of looking like they're gonna do, and Jessica and Jean-Claude are both still struggling with it, and the sail and the thing, and she's running to this, and it topples over, hitting on the head, and suddenly it's, oh, I'm having my eyes closed. Sorry, Robert's doing so much of a charade to try to feed me the answers here, and I think why it hits the thing? It hits her?
And so they get really close to shore, and then the boom swings wildly in the wind, hits Jessica and knocks her out. And so she's under the water, just like unconscious.
Having her eyes closed.
Famously having her eyes closed.
Having her eyes closed and not enough flesh. Yeah, and it's like, oh no, what should we do? Help, help. So Liz is like, I have to save them. So she runs into the water. She uses all her lifeguarding skills, which is a thing kids in Sweet Valley love to do. And when the going gets rough, they think about their lifeguarding skills. And we've seen it before. And she absolutely goes ahead and saves one of them. And then turns out Renee's over here saving the other one. And together they save him and they get him back to water. And it's a moment of wow. It's heartbreaker again, because just like Bill reenacted the trauma of he couldn't save Julianne, and then he saved the Dee from the drowning. And this was a healing moment that unlocked for him that he could be attracted even to a brunette with a muscular build. And now Renee is having, I think, some healing in this moment where, while he couldn't save his friend, he now has reenacted this with a different ending where he has been able to save these guys.
So then Jessica comes too, and Jean-Claude is there, and he's like, oh, Elizabeth, talking to Jessica, introduce me to your sister. And Elizabeth walks forward and says, hi, I'm Jessica, letting Jessica keep up the charade that she is Liz, which is treated as this big thing. And Liz even goes, do you have any idea how hard it was for me to lie to Jean-Claude? And it's like,
fuck
why
yourself.
do you care? You're going to be here for another 3 days. Why would it matter if this random guy you're never going to see again thinks you're you or you're her?
So stupid. Also,
So
I think that was the moment where, like, I think the reason Liz did that, even though it's so hard for her to tell a little lie, was because I think that was the moment where, like, when Jess opened her eyes and saw Jean-Claude and was like, Jean-Claude, you're okay. Or when he opened his eyes or whatever it was, it's like then she could see there was like a real love between them. So I think that was her sort of acknowledging that. It was like her giving a little token.
It was very beautiful. So now Renee is basically healed and is now ready to talk about his dad. He's ready to think through like why he's such a dick to Elizabeth. He apologized to Elizabeth. Weirdly, Elizabeth apologizes to him, where I'm like, you have nothing to apologize for, sweetheart, but whatever. And
I think she has a couple of things to apologize for, actually.
that doesn't surprise me that you would think that. It feels like you're blaming women and I'm believing women. So I guess we're kind of two sides of the patriarchy. One of us kind of fighting to topple it and the other one kind of keeping it together.
I mean, you just go ahead and tire yourself out because I'm going to cut all that anyway. So just keep going as long as you need to. I have the power here. Okay, I'm the captain now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're the patriarchy. Of course you have the power. And the book kind of ends with Jess saying, hey, just so you know, I came clean to Jean-Claude. I told him who I was, and we're still going to see each other. And Elizabeth's like, great, I'm having a good time with Renee, and he's fixed himself, so we're going to see each other. And we still have like 4 more days left in can. Let's see what happens. And then the book ends.
Yeah, it's wild because basically, like, when they come home after this whole ocean scene, and it's very much like post-shower. Like, it's very much like Renee has just had a shower and his hair is like combed and his cheeks are pink from the heat, and you have a feeling of like, ooh, we were all wet and cold and scared, and now we're all warm and cozy together, and now we're ready to like be vulnerable and nice. And they basically like, he basically commits to like, I'm so sorry I was such an asshole for the trip, and like, even though there's only a couple days left or whatever it is, like, I'm gonna really make the most of it. I'm gonna show you all the stuff you haven't seen, like, we're gonna have so much fun. And she's like, great. And then she also is like, well, and I have a little bit of a confession, Renee. And he's like, what? And she's like, well, when I first came here, I was hoping we could be really good friends. And I was just like, Liz.
Yeah.
Like, that's her way of saying something that's obscene for Liz, what she just said. So that's also what made me say, like, yeah, she has been absolutely lusting for him.
And that's the book.
Do we have to, well, except we haven't talked about Dybbuk.
Oh my gosh. One of the things I really, really love about the book, and it's kind of A Tale of Two Cities like, is that it does a really good job of juxtaposing what's going on in Cannes and what's going on back in Sweet Valley. So like, there'll be like, at one point, Liz will be thinking like, oh, I wonder how Stephen or the Dybbuk is getting along with Fernie, Renee's sister, who's on the exchange. And then it'll cut right there. Or it'll be like, this is the best day of my life. And then it cuts to Stephen was having the worst day of his life, or Cara was having the worst day of her life. And it like really does a great job of juxtaposing. But what basically was happening back in Sweet Valley is something that is unbelievable, which is that Fernie Renee's sister, Avery's daughter, looks exactly like Trisha Martin to the point where everyone is saying it. So the thing that is unbelievable, one, is that she looks exactly like Trisha Martin. For most of the book, I thought one of the big reveals was going to be that Trisha Martin's dad was the same guy as Renee and Fernie's dad.
Oh my God. Paul, I think his name, Martin.
Yeah, Paul Martin, I think. So the first time I texted you and I said this book's
wow.
bangs, it was right when Jessica and Elizabeth found the picture of Fernie and were like, oh my God, it looks like Trisha Martin. Now, this is for listeners who have read A Tale of Two Cities, this kind of unexplained doppelgangering is very Dickensian. So like one of the main plot points in A Tale of Two Cities is that these two characters who are not related in any way, shape, or form are identical. I should have been thinking, oh, Fernie's just identical with Trish Martin. So she is staying at the Wakefield's house. She inexplicably speaks almost no English. Renee speaks perfect English. He's 2 years older than her. And the way they explain it is that once Gordon, the dad, left, they stopped speaking English. But it just doesn't make any sense that she would speak absolutely no English. And she speaks basically no English whatsoever. Stephen's spending time with her and loving it because she looks like Trish Martin. He has put Kara Walker on the absolute backest of back burners. Listeners will remember that Stephen and Kara started dating once Kara, quote unquote, became more mature.
Wait, sorry. Did we explain that Trisha Martin is his late girlfriend who is dead?
We probably should have.
I don't think we said that. So Stephen, who of course is the twins' brother, which we might have said, Trisha Martin is his girlfriend who died a little while ago. I think we probably said in the beginning when we were talking, because it's like we've read about this a lot. And he has been on a grief journey with that. And that's who that is.
And as we know, grief is not linear. And as we know, grief sometimes makes you a complete fucking asshole.
You know, grief is not linear, it does come in waves. And sometimes that means we have to read essentially the same plot about 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. And it's painful, and that gives us empathy.
Yeah, it is painful. So he falls head over heels for Fernie. She doesn't speak enough English for them to have real conversations. So he has just projected all of Trisha Martin's characteristics onto her. He is ignoring Kara and he is taking her out all the time. They're having like very kind of broken, stilted conversations where very little communication is happening. And then finally, he recruits one of his friends who is a French major at college to be a translator. And finally, he can understand what Fernie thinks when she speaks. And now all of a sudden he's like, oh, wait, I don't like this at all. This girl isn't Trish Martin. She seems so young and silly. She's interested in makeup and fashion magazines. He's like, you're such a dick and such a misogynistic asshole. But then he basically is like, oh, I'm not into you. Never mind. And then goes to Kara and is like, I'm so sorry. I love you. I blew it. Do you take me back? And she's like, I don't know if I should. You need more time. And he's like, no, I don't. And she's like, okay.
Alarm bells at this point. It also like
a cacophony of alarm bells.
As I think we alluded to, but I'm not sure how much we said, but like, yeah, there's been a whole bunch of books where, and at the same time as we have compassion for Stephen for his grief, and of course we understand a lot of his pain and confusion is coming from, and we feel for that, and we want to validate that, and that's okay. It doesn't excuse that he has been really careless and reckless with his treatment of Kara, and there's just been all these repeated things, and this is, you know, once again, and I think it's been a cumulative impact on her, and we can't forget that she recently went through the kind of breakup of her family, her parents' divorce, her dad and brother like moved away, and so she's been going through some stuff too. And there's a scene that is heartbreaking in this when Enid bumps into her at the ice cream place, and she's just sort of mechanically stirring her spoon in this melting ice cream with bags under her eyes, and she's just a shell. It was just so painful to see them get back together at the end.
Yeah, I really wanted her to move on. I wanted her to run away with that vanilla Swiss almond ice cream that she was eating, and just like so much of the third woman from the Perfect Match database, I just wanted her to give up men for food. Remember?
Literally.
And
you know what?
What?
I thought maybe did I go too far when I said Dybbuk should be in a chastity belt?
Oh no, you're right.
Like, yeah.
I mean, maybe you didn't go far enough. I think Dybbuk should be in an iron mask, which gets referenced in the text.
What happens in an iron mask?
So the man in the iron mask was that they tell the story about the 17th century prisoner who like no one really knew who he was, and there were all these different rumors, and so he's just kept in a tower in an iron mask, kind of away from everyone else. And I feel like maybe the Dybbuk should be kept in an iron mask away from everybody else.
Yeah, but like, isn't that kind of doing like prison? And isn't that kind of like not nice? And aren't we kind of like saying prison isn't always the nicest thing to do to people?
That is
But
true.
like, is Dybbuk even a person? He's a demon. He gets special treatment. Demons are different than people. And I think what we've said with our designation is what?
I just feel like this, we
Whoa.
start dehumanizing people and then we put them in prisons. Like that's how it happens.
You're saying it's a slippery slope.
I'm saying it's a slippery, dippery slope.
Fine, fine. Well then, okay, so not prison, but a muzzle. A muzzle.
Yeah, like an iron mask.
But then how does he eat? There's holes?
Through the iron mask. Yeah, there are holes in the iron
A
mask.
straw?
I mean, the iron mask, I feel like it's kind of a full face muzzle.
Dybbuk is such a piece of shit. Like, for example, like she said the word science, or he understood the word science, and he was like, oh, I guess she's interested in medical science and wants to cure cancer like Trisha did. Like, that's being smart and good. But then it turns out she's interested in like cool stuff like food science and
makeup science.
Yeah, and like, which are extremely legitimate things. And it just must explicitly be said that like his value judgments on her interests as silly, as not worthy, it's just so misogynistic. It's so condescending. And that's why he's a demon. All right.
And he sees, like, a similar example is he sees her reading The Bald Soprano. And he's like, oh, she's interested in absurdist plays. I'm interested in absurdist plays. It's like, first off, Stephen, you're not bright, but whatever. But then he finds out that she was just reading it for homework. And he's like, oh, she's reading for homework? Never mind. She only likes fashion magazines? Boo. And it's like, just be less gross. Just because a woman likes something does not inherently devalue it, you dipshit.
Yeah, and why are you so dumb that you think only quote unquote highbrow things are good and quote unquote lowbrow things are bad? Like, are you new? Like, we've been knowing that is bullshit for even since 1983. So you should be understanding that too. Okay, your sister writes a gossip column and we all call her like she's a genius journalist, all right? So don't get it fucking twisted. Plus, when was the last time you came home talking about one of your absurdist places while we were eating our Guidos? Bitch, STFU.
As they say.
Ned and Alice, I can't. They have this moment. They're talking to each other of like, oh, we're worried about Dybbuk. This girl obviously looks just like Trisha. And he obviously is like ignoring Kara and so on.
And so then what they do is they're like, oh, we should have a really meaningful conversation with our son because we are his parents and it's important that we raise him and talk to him about it. Is that what happens?
No, they say something to the effect of like, well, there's nothing we can do. So I guess all we can do is hope and wait. And then that section ends with, you talked about the kind of throwing back and forth between the two cities and whatnot. And it's a joke because it ends with something like Alice being like, well, I'm sure at least Liz and Jess are having fun on whatever the hell they're doing over there in France. So at least some of our kids are going to be doing okay. And it's like, I don't know. I just thought it was funny because it was like very dramatic for them. And there's a moment where like Alice pounds her hand on the table or something. I was like, are they drunk?
This is happening kind of juxtaposed. So we're flashing between Liz on a quick tour of Cannes with Renee, and he's being like a complete dick to her. And they're flashing between that and Sweet Valley. And this was one of the moments where I was like, I don't believe that Liz could understand this. Avery and Renee are fighting back and forth. And they're speaking she's not even in the same room. And they're screaming at each other in rapid, angry French. And like, as someone who sometimes tries to understand people speaking another language, when it's rapid and angry and you're not in the same room and you can't read their lips, like I think there's no chance she would be able to understand all of this.
I do.
Okay.
Like, her French is supposed to be pretty decent and like they're saying pretty basic things. Like, I don't know. I think she could. Plus context cues,
But
like
she's not in the same room. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's very hard to get context cues.
No, but I mean context of the fact that like she knew that Renee was supposed to take them touring and then left. So she might know what the mom's getting angry at him about, kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, then he says American. It's like, yeah, we kind of know what this is.
Okay.
I don't think it's that big.
I repeatedly am just so annoyed with the trope of like this complete asshole who secretly has a heart of gold, and like we just need to rehabilitate him and get him to talk about his father wounds, and then he'll be fine. Which is the whole Renee plotline. It's just like, yeah, sure he's a dick, but we can love him through it. And it's just like, and it just, I feel so bad for the 16-year-old people, and especially girls out there who are reading this and are like, yeah, sure, this guy is like basically verbally abusive to me and super mean, but I can fix it. Like, I hate that that's the message.
It's always the girls that are done dirty. Let me tell you, even Avery and her husband, the book says that listen to this. When Avery, listen, it turns out that even in France, moms love to sit Elizabeth down and absolutely make her their therapist. And she decides to tell Elizabeth their entire life story. She basically is like, so her husband, Gordon, who like left after Fernie was born or whatever, was American. I guess he moved back to America. He was in Boston or something. And she's like, I had bitter and anger towards him for a while. And I guess I like put that on Renee. And that's why Renee has like this chip on her shoulder. But like over the years, it turns out that like Gordon is writing every month letters to the kids, even though Renee never like answers him and like doesn't read them. And like that really proved to her that he actually really cares. But she feels so guilty that her own bitterness that she had must have transferred to Renee over those early years is like now going to have him without a father. And I'm just like, wow, like they really had to make that be the story, huh? Instead of just like, he has resentment against his father who left and lives in the US now. Like they had to make her, what I'm saying? Like that could have happened on its own.
Yeah, she has to be the villain no matter what. It's this dysfunctional relationship between two men where one man left the family. Oh, it's the mom's fault. Don't even worry. There are a couple of really good, so Renee is a huge dick, but he's pretty funny. Mm-hmm. Like on the tour, he takes Elizabeth to lunch with his friends and they sit down and order. And then he like very, very loudly calls over the waiter and is like, waiter, we need ketchup. Get ketchup over here. And I was like, what? And he's like, oh, for Elizabeth, like you Americans drown everything in ketchup. Your food is so gross. You have to put ketchup on it. I was like, it's like a pretty good insult. But Liz actually delivers what I feel to be the insult of the text. Did you clock this?
Mm-mm.
So Elizabeth is she's talking to Jean-Claude and the Countess about using French. And she thinks to herself, Elizabeth had watched a movie on television the night before and had learned more in 2 hours than she had in 2 months of French classes back in Sweet Valley. Ouch, Mademoiselle Dalton. That's rough.
Well, except then she says it's because of the commercials, and the commercials are actually easier. If it was just TV and movies, I'd say no. But maybe it's. I don't think it's true. No, Matt Dalton. Listen, Dalton's probably doesn't even know French. Like,
yeah, like I agree. I think this proves it.
Let me put it this way: I have a feeling, and I would put American dollars on the bet that Nora Dalton's resume,
fictitious,
may include some generous padding, as it were.
As it should be.
There's a little bit of a fun scene where it just gets to experiment with the sort of European way of topless beaches. And it's
a little scandalized.
I think it's so much of this is so realistic. And I thought what was so fun is that, Jess is the exciting, adventurous one, and she loves a thrill and all of this. And now she's at this beach, and it's so kind of a non-thing for everyone there that to not have a top on. And she's like, oh, let me be like them, and just her sort of trying to be nonchalant, but it's like, so she was like finally got up the courage, she like took off the straps and then she like jumped into her towel face down right away kind of thing. It's so funny. It just felt realistic. It was cute.
When we first meet Jean-Claude, there's something that I do like where there are some like really strong parallels between Renee and Jean-Claude, because both of them have all sorts of preconceived notions about Americans and like try and project them onto Elizabeth. But what's different, of course, is that Jean-Claude's preconceived notions are like friendly and kind, and he's willing to update them. Whereas Renee is just like a complete fucking dick. But there's this interesting moment, and we could call it Pascal's, whatever the French word for gun is, which I don't know, maybe revolver. So Jean-Claude says, do they really have hot tubs in every house? The Countess had laughingly translated the French word for hot tub. So I looked up the French word for hot tub, and sometimes they just say jacuzzi, which is fine. But other times they use the French word bon de remieux. Oh, pistolet, Pardo has texted me. So Pascal's pistolet. Oh, I like the way that sounds.
Mm.
Bon de remieux. So bon is like bath, like a bon marie. But remue, remous, is like rough water or a whirlpool or an eddy or a,
Bravo.
or as they
Bravo,
say in
Robert.
France, voila. Oh, I guess
Okay.
that's not the same thing, but you know what I mean.
Beautiful.
But isn't that kind of cool? Because I'm sorry, at the end
Beautiful.
of the book, readers, you remember there's this like whole eddy and water issue. While they're talking, they also Liz says she's visited LA and she actually did see some famous people once when we went out to this really hot new club. It was wild. There they were dancing right next to us. I'm like, why isn't that one of the books?
Okay, I assumed that was their night out in Perfect Summer, right?
Yes. Oh, brava to you, Pardo. Oh yeah. I want more.
Yeah, same. It sounds so exciting. Part of Liz's reaction to Renee, it was, I think, interesting that, like, of course it's very mild, but you know, in Sweet Valley, Liz and Jess represent the aspirational prototype, the perfect California girls and the California tans, and the eyes look like the sea, and the hair shows that you've been in the sun and everything else, and they fit right in, and they're the ones, and they're white, and they're the ones. And of course, in France, this is still the case in many ways, but just the fact of being marked for Elizabeth, just her having this at all experience of being marked in any way as different. Has she ever been in a group where she felt like she couldn't fully participate, or like, it's just, this is different for her. So I think it is interesting to see how she experiences Renee's assumptions of her, and like, sometimes she says something that proves him right, and some of the things he says are true, and what does it mean to think about, like, oh well, it is also true about a lot of Americans, but am I that way? Well, Jess kind of is being that way, and Jess actually is being the stereotype, right? And how does she deal with that? And like, and her being at lunch and like him making fun of her, but then the other guys, I think, being kind of gracious and defending her and trying to make her more comfortable, and just her sort of like blushing in that context, or having a red face, and just the feeling of like the attention's on you in a negative way because you're not from there. It's so small, but it's, for her, really something new, I think.
I wonder her first experiences. It's very formative. I mean, that we were talking last night in class about, like, you understand your culture best when you interact with someone from a different culture and have to understand how you do things differently. Do you keep your bathing suit top on? Yes or no?
I mean,
No.
this is a very, foundational principle of cultural anthropology, certainly.
Absolutely. Tops on, tops off.
We must make the strange familiar and the familiar strange. And how do we do this? Encounters.
And taking our tops off. Yeah, topless encounters. There's this interesting thing immediately post the twin switch that we talked about a little bit, where Jean-Claude does clock something. He is like, this is going to sound really silly, Elizabeth, but if I didn't know better, I might be tempted to think you were a different person today. And he keeps like kind of pushing on it. And Jessica's so fucking smart. She goes, Jean-Claude, I don't know what you're talking about. Do I look like a different person from the girl you were with yesterday? Bravo. I mean, it's just so fucking good. Gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss. She does it.
I mean, something I've been waiting to be able to appreciate with you, and now I can finally say it, is, we've talked about why she'd be good on all the different reality shows, and I think on Traitors,
she'd excel.
She's an absolute master of what they refer to as a double bluff.
Yeah.
Okay.
No spoilers for Traitors, though, but
no.
For our listeners. But if you're not watching,
you could do that yourself. You can handle spoiling yourself. There was one scene where I was like, this is trying to tell me something and I don't know what. Oh. And there's a meaning here that I am not grasping.
Well, thank you for coming kind of to me. Thank you for being so vulnerable.
Well, you're usually liking to be the smart one and liking to be the one on Jeopardy and the professor.
It's the role I inhabit. It's my gender. I could have a page number.
And I just, I said, is it this? Is it that? Is it this? Is it that? And I just, nothing really kind of landed that hard for me. All right. So it's page 118. So Robert described how Liz is kind of sent on this little adventure through town as she has to basically run this errand for Avery, who's at the hospital. She has to get her a prescription for one of her patients. And it's a very fun thing, I think, to see Liz has to get all the tokens for the, or get the different cash to get the to be able to pay for it, and then she has to figure out the transit, and it's very fun and whatever. But she ends up getting delayed for various reasons, and part of them is that when she's on her way back, the bus is delayed because of some traffic scenario going on, and that ends up taking some time to resolve. And the traffic scenario, it just felt symbolic of something, and I didn't know what, because otherwise I'm like, why this? And so this is what it is. This is what it is, okay? There's been an accident. A little car has been crushed against a tour bus. Okay, the tour bus has a dent. The car had skidded around the bend and gone out of control. No one had any major injuries. Everyone was fine, but we got a crumpled car sitting there in the road, basically, right? The tour bus people and everyone else basically is now outside. And what Elizabeth comes to understand is that there's an argument going on about how to handle this. And she learns that one group wants to push the car aside so the traffic won't be blocked. The others insist that the police have to arrive first to make a complete report. You know the French, they're rather fond of paperwork. And Liz is like, but there's all these witnesses. Surely the police can get that report. Like, why should we all wait and be delayed? And then the British woman's like, well, we have to wait for the outcome. Anyways, in the end, what happens is they agree on a compromise, which is to mark in chalk where the car was. They decide then they can move it while they wait for the police. Everyone can move forward. So I'm like, okay, well, we have a tour bus of all these international people. They're talking about a sort of culture clash. The French like paperwork. Is the idea here just that Liz is witnessing an example of intercultural conflict management and is going to then apply this to her? Like, what is this? Like, it just felt so specific, and this debate that they're having, it was like, why?
I have a couple of things. One is I marked, you know, the French, they're rather fond of paperwork. That is not what I associate with the French. If she were in Germany, I'd be like, oh, absolutely. There's probably like 12 different triplicate forms. I don't think of the French as being particularly like fastidious about paperwork.
I agree. There was another stereotype that I was like, that is a opposite stereotype. I forget what it was, but yeah, agree.
But I do think there is, I think you're right. I think this is one of those classic Becky moments where you've kind of gotten to the kernel of wisdom from the text, but you don't trust yourself enough to kind of hold on to it.
No, but why is that interesting? What is interesting about that? I guess, like, what's the point? Does she take something from that? Does it impact her in some way? Like, I didn't really, like, it's not like she, or is it just supposed to represent a parallel to, like, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like there's another piece. You know what I mean?
Is there something to the marking where the trauma was, but moving the trauma? Okay, no, I guess there isn't.
No, I'm laughing and I'm with you. I'm laughing of joy. I'm laughing of joy.
Okay.
I'm laughing of joy.
Because I do think that there is something to be said about like,
how do we move? Yes, how do we move past the trauma? You know, do we have to forget to move on? Oh, we can put the check. Yes. And Stephen should instead of being with Fernie, must take a piece of chalk and mark it instead of trying to be always repeating it. Gorgeous. I'm sorry, I'm gonna be myself. Go on.
Wait, are you making fun of me or are you being serious? I honestly can't tell.
Like 95% I'm being serious.
Oh, well, I'll take it. That 95 is an A. Not even an A minus. Yeah. Okay. So that's that. I guess the idea of, I mean, one of the central things of this text is like, how do we?
No, I'm being serious. Stop.
You cannot think that is being serious.
Oh my God. Now it's like you have a dose of medicine because you know what it's like to have like eyebrows that you're perceiving as being hostile. And it's like, that's my life. That's my whole life. You're being like Liz right now, experiencing what it's like to actually like be in someone else's shoes. Wow. Wow. It's like here in France. It's like that time you looked in the mirror and realized your hair part was different.
We don't have time for that. I do, as you know, have a heart out. So I was just going to say that like one of the central things about this text is like, what do we do with the wounds from the past?
Okay, sure. One of, I think my favorite ever, just little moments. So, you know, she's been pulled out the ocean. She's absolutely ready to party, has on her stirrup pants. And Liz is still kind of being annoyed about the whole switcheroo, and she's kind of trying to tell her, get over it. Liz is basically lecturing her, and she's like, and like Jessica basically says, like, listen, like, I wouldn't have done it except I really was like in love with John Claude and I didn't want to tell him the truth because like blah blah. And Liz is like, I think the bump on your head affected you. How could I know you were in love with Jean Claude when I didn't blah blah blah? And then Jessica toyed with a lock of hair, twisting it around her index finger. Elizabeth had been so grateful to see her safe that Jessica thought she had gotten off without having to go into this. Now she could see she had been wrong. If you stopped reading there, you might think that it's like, you could possibly think that's like she had been wrong about lying, about the deceit. Like what we think is going to happen here is that Liz lectures her and she's going to sort of like have to atone for what she did wrong. But the fact that all she cares about is like getting away from having to listen to this lecture is so fucking funny. It's this. So it's now she could see she had been wrong, and she'd been wrong about the fact that like Liz would be so grateful that she was alive that she wouldn't have to listen to this. And then she thinks if only she had left the room a moment earlier, she wouldn't have had to discuss the whole situation, which I laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed because like someone else, that line would be, you know, if only she had had the courage to tell the truth, she wouldn't have been in this situation. But it's like, no, if she would have left the room a minute earlier, she wouldn't have to deal with Liz drone on and on. It's so funny. I love her so much.
She's the best.
I mean, the ending's very strange. It's just really, really strange because it's like basically, you know, Liz and Renee are sort of finally having this intimate moment. We think we're at least going to see, like, I thought it was going to end with then we see those next few days if they have this lovely time
Right?
and share some nice kisses. Like, but instead it's like they just sort of allude to, he's like, I'm going to make it up to you, and it's not too late.
And you've got yourself a date. Fun.
And then it ends with Elizabeth's like, she had a feeling that these were going to be days that she wasn't likely to forget. Anyhow, what's the next book after this one? Oh, one of my favorites, Alone in the Crowd. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Okay, Robert, we have just a few minutes, but I think just for the context, we don't have a cliffhanger, but I think we can remind ourselves that the previous context for the next regular edition book that is coming, which is Alone in the Crowd, is going to be that we are introduced to Lynn Henry. Okay, Lynn Henry is watching the droids and looking at them in an intense way, and she seems kind of sad and lonely. And Liz thinks, why doesn't she have any friends? And Liz vows, I'm gonna try to say hello to her on Monday. And what's going on with Lynn Henry is kind of the question.
And you know, Pardo, if you have a friend who seems alone in the crowd, who seems lonely, who has no one to talk to, and no one to listen to, you should share Sweet Valley Hive with them.
Yes, you should. If you know anyone who maybe they don't have a great personality in terms of like, but they know what's good. It's like they have good taste. It's like you don't be it's like you don't be friends with them, but it's like you trust their taste.
Yeah. Like God forbid you have to talk to them.
I was trying to spend time with this person. No. God forbid.
But
just
also
slip them a tip and tell them I got something for you. Okay, it's called Sweet Valley Hive.
And also, by the way, like maybe you have a friend who isn't alone in the crowd, but could also listen to a podcast. Send them this podcast.
Yeah, and please also, okay, you've now listened to our very nice podcast. You've had a nice little giggle. You've learned something about France. You've learned something about twins. And, you know, we didn't say give us $100 for this. We said give us absolutely $0. So please open up your app, rate. Okay, it's the easiest thing in the world. Do it. It'll take 1 second. Just rate the 5 stars. Okay, make sure you're obviously subscribed. Duh. And then if you have it in your heart to take the extra 2 seconds to put a good, nice review, please do that. It will make a huge difference. Thank you. Hopes, expectations, fears, etc. for Alone in the Crowd, for real.
I mean, Liz is a meddler, but she is certainly not a licensed therapist. And I do believe that Lynn Henry needs the truth. Yeah. Lynn Henry needs the help of a concerned and trained adult.
You think? Based on what? I mean, what? We've seen her be a little morose at lunchtime? I mean, we haven't, what? Have we gotten that much?
I feel just kind of sad for her.
Okay.
Just my thought.
What do you think is going to happen?
I mean, she probably has some kind of wound that Liz helps her heal.
Well, we're certainly going to see, aren't we?
Uh-oh.
All I'm going to say, and I did text you this, but one thing I'm excited about is there happens to be, by absolute coincidence, a literary reference in this book, like explicit, that you have brought up in a previous book. So I'm excited for you to see that. And you're gonna say, ooh.
I probably will. Okay. Well, thank you for another lovely afternoon in Cannes, France.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Sweet Valley Hive, hosted by Robert Marks and Rebecca Pardo. For more, check out our Instagram at Sweet Valley Hive. Theme song by Yessie and artwork by Elliot Carroll.